It was supposed to be a holiday of warmth, a table full of food, laughter, and family. That's what everyone expects when the season rolls around: houses glowing with lights, neighbors carrying trays of pies, kids running across the street with sparklers. But in my house, it always felt different. That year, I walked into my uncle's living room, the place where everyone gathered for the big holiday dinner. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air, glasses clinked, voices layered over one another in a blur of cheer. I stood there, coat still on, scanning the table. Every seat was taken, but none of them felt like mine. I slipped into a chair at the far end next to an empty spot where someone should have been. The cushion was cold, untouched. Across from me, my cousins clinked glasses with their parents, their laughter spilling over like champagne foam. To my left, an aunt was already showing off photos of her son's promotion. To my right, a couple I barely knew debated the best way to cook ham. And me, I sat there, nodding, smiling when needed, but feeling like a guest at my own family's table. At one point, my uncle raised his glass for a toast. He looked around the table, naming each person, praising their achievements, their milestones. To Mark's new job, to Lisa's engagement, to Daniel's graduation. Each name was met with applause, with cheers. Then his eyes landed near me just for a moment before sliding away. No name, no toast. Just a pause, as if I didn't quite fit into the script. I laughed it off, even clinked my glass against my cousin's, but inside I felt the sting. It wasn't just being forgotten, it was being invisible. Everyone else was a headline, a success story. I was the blank line no one bothered to fill. Later, when dessert was served, the humiliation cut even deeper. My aunt asked casually, "So are you still doing your thing? What was it again?" I tried to answer, to explain what I'd been working on, but halfway through someone interrupted with a story about their kid's college application. The room tilted away from me, back toward the same familiar voices. My words dissolved like smoke in the air, unheard, unnecessary. That's when it hit me. The cruelest part of family gatherings isn't the arguments or the politics or the nosy questions. It's the silence, the way a room can be so loud, yet leave you with nothing but the echo of your own thoughts. I excused myself after dessert slipped out to the porch, the cold air biting my skin. From inside, I heard the muffled laughter, the forks clattering the toasts I was never part of. I pulled my phone out, stared at the empty screen, half hoping for a message, just one sign that I mattered. But nothing came. Only silence. I wanted to believe I didn't care, that I was stronger than this, but as fireworks lit the sky in the distance, I felt it, the humiliation of being surrounded by people, yet completely unseen. The humiliation of knowing that my own chair at the table was little more than an afterthought. And from that night on, I started to disappear. After that holiday night, something inside me cracked. I didn't make a scene, I didn't shout, I didn't tell anyone how humiliated I felt. I just withdrew. When the next family dinner invitation came, I stared at the screen for a long time. The words were simple. Dinner Sunday, don't be late, but they burned. I typed out a polite excuse, erased it, then finally replied, "Sorry, I can't make it." The following week, I didn't even bother replying. The message sat there unanswered while I buried myself in anything that would distract me. Work, TV, long walks at night, anything but sitting at that table again. At first, it felt like freedom. I told myself I was finally setting boundaries, finally protecting my peace. No more awkward toasts, no more sidelong glances when someone asked about my life. I thought I was reclaiming control, but with every skipped dinner, the silence between us grew heavier. My phone would buzz with calls from my mother, and I'd let it ring out. My uncle left me. Voice messages cheerful at first, then tinged with disappointment. "You missed a good one tonight. Maybe next time." I saved them but never listened twice. Each one was another reminder of the distance I was building brick by brick, excuse by excuse. The family group chat didn't stop, of course. Photos would pop up, plates piled high, kids making faces, everyone crammed together on the couch after dessert. I'd scroll past them quickly, pretending they didn't matter, but later in the quiet of my room, I'd open them again. Stare at the glow of the screen, the laughter frozen in pixels. And always I'd see the space where I should have been. The spot at the edge of the photo, the chair no one sat in. It was mine, and it was empty. Sometimes relatives would ask me directly. My cousin messaged, "You coming this week?" I typed out a lie, something about deadlines, something about being too tired. Deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't too tired to go. I was too tired to face it. Too tired to sit through another night of smiling while feeling invisible. The problem was, the more I avoided them, the harder it became to explain myself. Each no made the next yes almost impossible. There were nights when I sat by the window, phone in hand, debating. Should I call? Should I show up unannounced? But pride held me back. Fear, too. Fear that I'd walk through the door and nothing would change, that I'd still be the shadow at the table. So I stayed silent. I convinced myself solitude was better than rejection, that the ache of being alone was easier than the humiliation of being unseen. But the truth is, separation isn't clean. It doesn't just cut you off from the pain, it cuts you off from the joy too. I missed birthdays. I missed inside jokes that would never be retold to me. I missed the chance to be present in memories I can't get back. And still I stayed away. Week after week, month after month, until the calendar felt like a chain of absences, each link another reminder that I was slipping further from the people who once knew me best. The strange part, no one ever told me not to come back. The door was still open. The chair was still there. But I couldn't bring myself to walk through it. Ghosting them was supposed to make me stronger, supposed to protect me from the sting of humiliation. Instead, it made me smaller, lonelier, like a shadow shrinking against the wall. The more I stayed away, the more I slipped. At first, it was just family dinners I avoided, but soon it bled into everything else. Birthdays, anniversaries, holiday parties with friends. I told myself I was too busy, too tired, but the truth was simpler. I couldn't stand the reminder of what I had lost. Every gathering felt like a mirror held up to my face, reflecting the absence I carried inside. It started small. One skipped dinner became 2, then 3. Before long, whole months passed without me seeing my family. The calls slowed down, the texts turned shorter, and eventually they stopped asking altogether. That should have made me feel free, but it didn't. It left me hollow, as if the silence I had created was now swallowing me whole. Work didn't help either. I'd sit at my desk, staring at the screen, fingers frozen above the keyboard. My mind drifted to the same place, those chairs around the table, the laughter I used to pretend not to hear. Productivity dropped, deadlines slipped. Colleagues started noticing. "You all right?" they'd ask, and I'd smile, nod, tell them I was fine. But fine was a lie. I was unraveling, thread by thread. Nights were the worst. I'd come home to an empty apartment, toss my keys on the counter, and sink into the couch. The quiet was deafening. I'd scroll through my phone, searching for something, anything, that would distract me. Social media made it worse. Photos of friends with their families, dinners, vacations, milestones. I'd stare at them too long, my chest tightening, wondering why their lives looked so full, while mine felt like scraps. Sometimes I'd pour a drink just to take the edge off. 1 became 2, 2 became 3. I told myself it was nothing, just a way to relax, but I knew better. I was numbing myself, drowning out the ache that never seemed to leave. And still, when the glass was empty, the silence returned heavier than before. The loneliness began to seep into my identity. I stopped answering friends' messages, stopped showing up to work happy hours. Even small talk at the grocery store felt exhausting. I'd keep my head down headphones in avoiding eye contact with strangers. It was easier that way, easier than risking the chance of someone asking about my family, about my life, about why I always seemed to be alone. The holidays came back around 1 year later. The lights were the same, the music the same, the traditions unchanged. But for me, everything felt different. I didn't even wait for an invitation this time. I knew it would come. I knew the door was still open. Instead, I turned off my phone, pulled the curtains shut, and let the night pass like any other. No tree, no dinner, no celebration. Just me sitting in the dim glow of the television, pretending it was just another evening. But pretending takes its toll. The more I tried to convince myself I didn't care, the more the weight pressed down. I thought I had chosen this separation, thought I was in control, but really, I was spiraling. I wasn't free. I was trapped, cornered by my own silence. And the further I sank, the harder it became to imagine a way back. There were mornings I didn't want to get out of bed, afternoons where the thought of facing the world felt unbearable. I kept telling myself it would pass, that I just needed time. But time wasn't healing anything. Time was widening the gap, deepening the wound, making every step back toward family feel impossible. I had pushed them away to protect myself, but all I had left was an empty apartment, unanswered messages, and the gnawing certainty that I had become a ghost in my own life. The downfall wasn't sudden, it was slow, quiet, almost invisible to everyone else. But to me, it was undeniable. I was falling, and I didn't know how to stop. I thought the silence would last forever. I had gotten used to it, or at least I told myself I had. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months. My phone sat on the counter, mostly quiet except for work reminders and the occasional delivery notification. Family gatherings kept happening without me, and I convinced myself that no one noticed, that my absence didn't matter. But then one afternoon, something happened that I didn't expect. It was a Saturday, the kind of grey, lazy day where I didn't even bother getting dressed. I was sitting on the couch, half watching a rerun I had seen a dozen times when there was a knock at my door. I froze. Hardly anyone ever came by unannounced. For a second I thought about ignoring it, but the knock came again, lighter this time, hesitant. I dragged myself up, opened the door, and there stood my little cousin. She couldn't have been more than 10. In her hands, she clutched a photo, edges bent, colors fading slightly. She looked up at me, nervous but determined. "Hi," she said, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, still in shock. She walked in like she had done it 100 times, sat down on the edge of the couch, and handed me the photo. I recognized it instantly. It was from that holiday dinner a year ago. Everyone gathered around the table, plates stacked high, glasses raised. And there I was, barely in the frame, sitting at the far end, half smile on my face, looking like I didn't belong. "I kept this," she said softly, "because you looked like you were sad, but you still smiled, and I thought that was really brave." Her words hit me harder than any silence ever could. I just stared at the photo, my throat-tight eyes burning. No one had ever said that to me. No one had ever noticed. Or at least, I thought they hadn't. I always believed I was invisible, but here was this little girl telling me she saw me, that my presence, however small, however awkward, had mattered to her. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a whisper. "Why did you come here?" She shrugged, picking at the corner of her sleeve. "Because I miss you at dinner. Everyone else talks so much, but I liked sitting by you. You don't make fun of me when I'm quiet. You listen. And I don't know, it's not the same without you." I sat back, letting her words sink in. I had spent so long believing my absence didn't matter, that my family had moved on without me, that I had already been erased. But in that moment I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe. Someone had noticed. Someone had missed me. We sat in silence for a while, her small hands folded in her lap, my fingers gripping the photo like it was a lifeline. The TV buzzed quietly in the background, but I barely heard it. For the first time in months, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was gentle, almost healing. She broke it with a question that cut straight to my chest. Will you come next time, please, just once, for me? I wanted to say yes right away, but the fear rose up like it always did. The fear of sitting at that table again, the fear of being overlooked, the fear of humiliation returning. But looking into her eyes, wide and hopeful, I knew I couldn't keep hiding. Not from her. Not when she had gone out of her way to find me, to remind me that I still mattered. "I'll try," I said finally. My voice shook, but I meant it. And she smiled, the kind of smile that makes the room feel brighter. She hugged me quickly, tightly, then slipped out the door as quietly as she had arrived. After she left, I sat there for a long time, the photos still in my hand. My apartment felt the same, empty, quiet, familiar, but something inside me was different. A crack in the armor I had built, a small flame, faint but steady. For the first time in what felt like forever, I thought about going back. Not because I wanted to prove anything, not because I thought the whole family would suddenly change, but because one person, one small voice had reminded me that I was not invisible. That night, I placed the photo on my nightstand. It wasn't much, just a picture, just a memory frozen in time, but it was proof. Proof that even in my worst moments, someone saw me, someone valued me. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to be seen again. After my cousin's visit, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. They played on a loop in my head, soft but insistent. "It's not the same without you. Will you come next time?" That night I left the photo on my nightstand, and every morning it was the first thing I saw. For months I had convinced myself my absence didn't matter, but that photo told a different story. And little by little it pushed me towards something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The first step was small. I answered a message. Not a long one, not even an apology, just a simple, "How are you?" to my cousin. She replied instantly, like she had been waiting, and her excitement spilled through the screen. "Good. Can't wait to see you again." It was such a small exchange, but it cracked something open. Next, I forced myself to pick up the phone when my mother called. My voice trembled as I said hello, bracing for guilt or disappointment, but instead she sounded relieved. She didn't scold me, didn't lecture, just asked if I was eating well, if I was sleeping enough. It was awkward, yes, but also strangely comforting. For the first time in months, I realized the distance I created wasn't unbridgeable. The bridge was still there, I just had to walk across. The hardest step was saying yes to another gathering. My cousin reminded me again, gently, not pushing, but hopeful. It would mean a lot if you came, even just for a little while. My chest tightened at the thought, but I agreed. On the day, my hands shook as I got dressed. The closer I got to the house, the more my fear returned. What if nothing had changed? What if I sat there invisible again, just like before? But it wasn't the same. When I walked in, my cousin ran up to me, hugged me tight like I had never left. A few people looked surprised, but no one turned me away. My aunt smiled, my uncle handed me a plate, my mother kissed my cheek. The room was noisy, yes, full of the same voices and stories, but I noticed something different. People asked me small questions, simple ones: how's work, what have you been up to? I didn't have long speeches to give, but I answered, and this time they listened. It wasn't perfect. I still felt the old sting now and then, the same nerves rising in my chest when the conversation moved too fast, when someone interrupted me. But instead of running, I stayed. I took a breath, reminded myself I had a right to be there. I wasn't invisible, not anymore. After that night, I started building new habits. Instead of ghosting every invitation, I chose carefully. If I was too drained, I'd send a message, let them know. Promise another time. No more vanishing, no more silence. I learned that saying no didn't have to mean disappearing. And when I did show up, I tried to be present. I sat closer to people who made me feel safe, like my cousin. I found small moments to connect, even if it was just sharing dessert or helping clear the table. Outside of family, I rebuilt too. I reconnected with a few friends I had pushed away. Sent a text, suggested coffee, apologized for the distance. Some friendships had faded too much to save, but others lit back up, warm and steady. I learned that relationships, like fires, can be rekindled if you tend to them gently. I also created my own traditions. Sunday mornings I made pancakes, just for myself, sometimes inviting a friend, sometimes not. I started writing letters, sealing them in envelopes to open. A year later, promises to myself in ink. I decorated my apartment for holidays, even if no one else saw it, because it made me feel alive. I stopped waiting for someone else to make my life meaningful. I began weaving it together thread by thread with my own hands. The rebuilding wasn't fast, and it wasn't flawless. There were setbacks, nights I still felt the urge to disappear, dinners where I slipped back into silence. But every time I looked at that photo on my nightstand, I remembered the truth. Someone was waiting for me, someone noticed when I was gone. And that reminder kept me moving forward, one small step at a time. For the first time in years, I believed I could belong again. It happened on another holiday, a year after the night I walked out and swore I wouldn't come back. This time, I showed up early, not because I was eager, but because I was tired of running. My cousin had begged me again, softly, and I promised. I stood on the porch with my hands in my pockets, heart pounding before I finally stepped inside. The house smelled the same: roast in the oven, cinnamon in the air. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, voices overlapping a chaos I used to hate. My mother spotted me first. Her eyes widened, then softened, and she hurried over, pulling me into a hug. It was awkward, stiff at first, but something in me cracked. I hadn't realized how much I missed being held like that. Dinner began, the usual noise rising around the table. I sat near my cousin, my anchor, but this time I didn't stay silent. When someone asked about my work, I answered honestly. When someone interrupted, I didn't swallow my words, I finished my thought. It was small, but it mattered. And then halfway through the meal, the moment came. My uncle raised his glass like he always did, naming people, celebrating milestones. He listed promotions, engagements, new homes. Then he looked at me. For a second, I braced myself for that same pause, the same silence that had cut me a year before. But instead he said, "And to you for coming back tonight. We've missed you." The words were simple, but they hit like a flood. My throat tightened, my chest ached, and I realized I couldn't keep pretending. So I put my glass down, took a breath, and said the words I had carried for too long. I felt invisible here. I stopped coming because it hurt, because I thought, none of you noticed when I was gone. The table went quiet. Forks hovered, mid-air. Conversations died. For a heartbeat, I regretted it. But then my mother's voice broke the silence. Soft, trembling. We did notice. We just didn't know how to say it. Her eyes filled with tears, and I saw regret written all over her face. "I'm sorry we made you feel that way." Other voices followed. My aunt reached for my hand, told me she never meant to dismiss me, that she hadn't realized her words cut so deep. Even my uncle, proud and stubborn, lowered his head. Maybe we should have paid more attention, he admitted. It wasn't perfect. No one suddenly became saints, but in that moment something shifted. They listened, really listened. And for the first time I let myself be honest. I told them how it felt to sit at that table, unseen, forgotten. I told them why I stayed away, why I built walls so high. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. When I finished, no one argued, no one dismissed it. They just sat there, letting my words settle into the room. It was messy, raw, but it was real, and that was enough. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside. She took my hands, her eyes searching mine. "I can't change the past," she said quietly, "but I want to do better, if you'll let me." I nodded, unable to speak, and for the first time in years I felt the weight begin to lift. Forgiveness didn't erase the hurt. It didn't erase the nights I spent alone, the humiliation, the downfall. But it gave me room to breathe. It gave me a way forward. Healing wasn't about pretending it never happened. It was about naming the wound, letting it be seen, and deciding it didn't have to define me forever. That night I realized the table didn't have to be a place of silence anymore. It could be a place of honesty, of rebuilding, of trying again. And for the first time, I wanted to stay. The next holiday came quicker than I expected. For once, I didn't dread it. I still felt nervous, yes, but not the crushing fear that used to choke me. This time, I felt something lighter, the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, the table could hold me again. When I arrived, the house was already buzzing. Laughter spilled out the windows, the glow of lights cutting through the cold evening air. I hesitated for a moment on the porch, then pushed the door open. My cousin was the first to spot me. She ran across the room, grinning wide, wrapping her arms around me like she had been waiting all year. And in that instant I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. Dinner began like always, dishes, clattering voices, overlapping kids running underfoot. But this time, the rhythm felt different. People made space for me, not just physically, but emotionally. They asked questions and waited for the answers. My words didn't dissolve into the noise. They stayed. They mattered. My uncle raised his glass again, and when he spoke my name, it didn't feel forced. It felt real. "To family," he said, looking at me with a small smile. "To having everyone back where they belong." I lifted my glass, and for the first time in years, I felt the toast was meant for me. The evening carried on, full of stories and old jokes, and instead of retreating into silence, I let myself laugh. It wasn't perfect. There were still interruptions, still moments where I felt a flicker of the old hurt, but I didn't run from them. I stayed, and I realized that staying itself was a victory. After dinner, I found myself sitting at the table long after most of the plates had been cleared. My mother sat beside me, my cousin on the other side. The room was quieter now, softer, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, belonging. My cousin leaned against me, tired from the excitement, and whispered, "See, it's better with you here." I smiled, holding back tears because she was right. That night, before I left, I looked around the room. Some faces were the same, some had grown older, some were missing, but the chairs were full. No empty seats. And in the center of it all, I felt a peace I hadn't thought possible. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past my window, and I thought about everything that had happened. The humiliation, the separation, the downfall, the small voice that pulled me back, the rebuilding, the healing. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been quick. But it was real. I had learned that family isn't about perfection or constant celebration. It's about showing up even when it's hard, even when it hurts. It's about forgiving, trying again, making space for one another. I unlocked my apartment, stepped inside, and glanced at the photo still sitting on my nightstand, the one my cousin had given me. For the first time, it didn't make my chest ache. Instead, it made me smile, because I knew the next photo would be different. In the next photo, I wouldn't be at the edge of the frame, half hidden, half forgotten. I would be there in the center of it with people who finally saw me and with a heart finally willing to see them back. That night, I whispered to myself, I came back. And for once, it didn't feel like a promise I couldn't keep. It felt like the truth. The chairs were no longer empty. The silence no longer crushing. I had a place again, not perfect, not flawless, but mine. And that was enough.